Hey, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Lab Report. As always, I am your host, Todd Rosales, and the man who has a bad back from carrying this show so much, Mr. Cannabis Law himself, Dustin Robinson. Thanks for joining me, Dustin.
Thank you very much. And I would say you carry the show and you carry all these podcasts you're doing. So we appreciate all the work you're doing on your end.
Oh, that's nice. I'm just the guy who makes jokes. You're the man who has all the information. And on that note, let's get into the news. So let's start in our backyard. Last week, we mentioned Curaleaf became the largest cannabis company in the world by revenue. They are also the first to market with sublingual tablets in the state of Florida. Now, funny enough, these are gummy tablets that closely resemble traditional edibles. But of course, the sublingual tablets will keep it on that. Dustin, we know the state has not passed regulations on edibles yet. What does this mean for the rest of the companies in Florida in regards to sublingual tablets or edibles for that matter?
Yeah, so the Florida Statute 301.986 basically said that the Department of Health needs to come out with edible rules with the assistance of FDACS. FDACS, I know, is willing and ready to get those finalized. It seems like DOH is kind of dragging their feet. Back in 2017, Certera filed a lawsuit against the DOH basically because they weren't finalizing those rules. And here we are today, and we still don't have edible rules. But what we do have is we have some creative MMTCs that are selling products like this. Trulieve has a powder that I guess is not considered an edible. There's tinctures out there. There's pills, tablets, and now we have this sublingual product. And I've also even heard of mucosals, which go on your cheek. So at the end of the day, if it's not being ingested through your digestive tract and it's being used as a sublingual, then I guess technically it's not edible. Although I do think some people cook with some of these tinctures and do other things with these products, and they're actually ingested. But it seems like the MMTCs have kind of played around with this, and they're not technically edible, so they are allowed. So I think innovation is great. That's something Florida is lacking as far as product diversity. So I think it's fantastic for the patients. It's very exciting, but it's also just a reminder that Florida is behind the eight ball because they haven't gotten these edible rules completed. So we don't have, gummies that could be eaten. We don't have chocolate bars. We don't have all this diversity of product that should be ingested because those edible rules haven't passed. So I think it's important we really start pushing the Department of Health. I thought after they licensed the third-party testing labs, they would start doing the edible rules, but for whatever reason, they're not. Maybe the pandemic has something to do with it at this point. I'm sure the Department of Health is busy, but it's really no excuse for them not having done it over the past 3 years that they've had an opportunity to do it. So it's exciting, new product, but I'd love to see more products, more edible rules passed, and more edible products.
Well, definitely hats off to Curaleaf for getting it done. And we need the FDA to really step this up because for some reason we're okay with having suppositories but not edibles. So the FDA is cool with you sticking it up your butt but not putting it in your mouth. So folks, let's get a move on this. Moving on, I think it's the responsibility of this show and many other shows to call out not only the good but the bad in this industry, right? Because there are a lot of bad players in this industry. And when we are a Schedule I substance and we are stigmatized, we need to make sure that we're putting our best foot forward. The SEC sues cannabis players for $25 million offering fraud. There's a group in California that raised $25 million from over 400 investors. Now, for those of you not in the investment world, typically when there's a private investment, you need to be called what's an accredited investor. People in this group were not all accredited investors. This spanned from 2017 to 2019 to finance a licensed marijuana and CBD farm and extraction facility. Everything about this situation on paper, at least in the article, was essentially a lie. And I think it makes the industry look bad. Dustin, can you dig into this a little bit for us? I know this was in your newsletter this week.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this is actually relatively common. I mean, you have a lot of relatively unsophisticated parties in this industry and in other industries that are raising very large sums of money. I work with a lot of different companies that, are just starting up, but they're raising 25, $50 million. I mean, tremendous amount of money that's being raised to get this industry really kicked off. And a lot of time they're not working with an attorney, or they're not working with an attorney that understands the securities law and what's required, and when registration with the SEC is exempt and when it's not. And like you mentioned, the accredited investors is one of the exemptions. So I'm really not surprised here. There's a lot of people going out raising a lot of capital, making a lot of ridiculous claims, and not doing the proper disclosures, not having all the necessary documentation that they need that's required. So it's not a surprise. This one happened to happen in the hemp industry, but same things happen. So same things happening on the marijuana side, psychedelic side, really in all industries. This happens all the time. And really, this never gets reported as long as the company does well. So, in a lot of companies, they do this, but you just never end up hearing because they end up doing okay. It's when a company goes totally under where the investors really get pissed off and start taking action. So it's unfortunate, another black eye on the industry, but it happens in all industries, and we got to just keep moving forward.
Folks, if you are going to back this industry financially, make sure you do your due diligence and make sure you know what you're doing. It's a great place to make generational wealth, but it's also a great place to lose your money very fast if you don't know what you're doing. So make sure that you guys are doing your due diligence before making any kind of investments, and don't listen to us. There are smarter people out there for investment advice. We're just out here having fun and giving you the news. So you can listen to Dustin a little bit more than me, but he'll give you a legal disclaimer on that. Dustin, this is something that I think is near and dear to your heart with how much you're involved in the hemp market, not only in Florida, but across the country. But with a ton of biomass on the market facing a ton of, or not a ton of potential buyers, hemp farmers are looking for different ways to sell their crops and protect themselves from falling prices. One way they're doing this is by setting up forward purchase agreements. It sounds kind of almost like a futures market. On paper, this sounds like a great way for the farmers to protect themselves. But as with anything, is there something, I'm like most of America. I read the headline. I'm like, cool, that sounds awesome. You read the article. Is there something in this article that there are potential long-term bad effects from setting up these futures contracts?
Yeah, I mean, like a purchase contract, you could put anything you want in. A purchase contract is just a purchase contract. So you could either establish a price today, or you can establish a price later on based on some sort of index. This particular article was referencing the Pan Exchange Index, which is an index for the hemp industry. And I actually think when I first saw it, I saw it at a trade show. The Pan Exchange guys, I met them probably almost 2 years ago. I don't even know how long it was, but it was a while ago. And I was very excited to hear that they were doing this, because that happens in other industries. There's a lot of indexes that you could reference in contracts. I came from I used to own a roofing manufacturing company, and one of our main inputs was asphalt. So we would have certain indexes we would reference with respect to our purchases of asphalt. There were tons of different oil indexes, lots of different indexes I could reference. In the hemp industry, we don't really have that. So an index is just something that you could reference in a contract to say, hey, we want to sell you this product in 6 months. We don't know where the pricing is going to be. Why don't we rely on the Pan Exchange Hemp Index? So I think contracts are super important. There's a million different types of contracts in the hemp industry. I've been doing a lot of different ones throughout the supply chain. And, I tell all my clients, you need to get stuff in writing. You need to be contracted, have your contracts locked tight. But it's important. There's a million different ways to structure a purchase contract. It's important, if you're growing biomass, to find yourself a buyer or know where you're going to be selling it. And one of the ways to do that is through a purchase contract. And another thing about a purchase contract, what I usually try to get from my growers is some sort of escrow deposit that's able to be used for the actual operation of the farm. So, if you're doing $1 million purchase contract and you could require them to put 20% in escrow, that's $200,000. If you could have a provision that allows you to actually access that $200,000 to grow your product, that's a big victory for a lot of these farmers. So lots of different ideas, lots of different things you can do in a purchase contract, but overall it's a good thing as long as you have a good attorney that's drafting it and putting in the provisions that are necessary.
Well, we certainly know a good attorney when we see one here. But no, I think this is a great thing, and I think it's a step towards normalizing in the cannabis industry. I mean, this is something, like you said, that happens in any other industry, and I'm glad that we're seeing it here. And, but this is going to lead into something that we're going to talk about later in the lab report, but I'm glad to see it. Moving on, The CBD, I'm going to need to read this one because there's a lot of big words in it, but the CBD drug Epidiolex received approval from the FDA to treat seizures associated with a third medical condition, seizures caused by Lennox-Gastaut and Dravet syndromes. This is pretty impressive considering it's a Schedule I substance. What does this mean for the greater view of cannabis being used for medical purposes and for potential research?
Yeah, I think it's great that they're starting to recognize additional indications that Epidiolex and other cannabis products could be used for. Epidiolex has actually been descheduled, which is interesting. So it's actually not a Schedule I drug. So they've actually descheduled it when it was approved, which just makes accessing a lot easier. So I think it's good for the industry. Obviously there's a whole push and pull in the industry with respect to the pharmaceutical industry taking over. And obviously, this is the pharmaceutical industry in play. A lot of, some of the cannabis advocates don't necessarily like that. And people have to be reminded that one of the reasons that the FDA cites for CBD not being allowed to be used in food is because Epidiolex is an approved FDA drug. So while we celebrate Epidiolex, it also has created some roadblocks with respect to some of these other CBD companies. One of the things that I thought was most interesting that was mentioned in the article is that it said that they're doing for Epidiolex, they did $116 million in the last quarter. I didn't realize it was that much. It just goes to show you that there is a tremendous amount of money to be made for cannabinoid FDA approved products. So it's a huge market. I mean, they're on pace to do probably almost $500 million for the year. So, and they're just getting started, and now they have another indication that they could sell it for. So, they'll be approaching $1 billion in revenue very, very shortly.
Well, I hope that this is a case of big pharma helping open the doors for everybody else, which would be a nice change of pace. And I hope this doesn't end up being big pharma saying we're the only ones that you can trust with this kind of substance and leave it in our hands. So as long as it's the former as opposed to the latter, I would say this is a good thing. But we'll keep watching it and tell you guys what's going on and see if it's going down that road. But I think, Dustin, what you just mentioned as far as the market cap there, it kind of leads us into the next topic that we're going to talk about. And this is absolutely one of my favorites on my show, Elevate Your Grind. I talk about this constantly. But right now, the cannabis is poised to rescue the economy from collapse. I am on my soapbox about this all the time. We do federal legalization of cannabis. We're going to bring back farming jobs. We're going to bring back logistic jobs. We're going to bring back retail jobs. We're creating a new industry. We're creating a new tax revenue stream. It has to deal with not persecuting minorities anymore. There are so many different great things, sustainability that this plant can do for this country that to some of us, it's a no-brainer. Dustin, I'm going to get off my soapbox and hand it over to you because you do this a whole lot more than me, and give us your thoughts on why cannabis is what we need to do to keep this country from going into another recession.
Well, I don't know that you even needed to pass the soapbox to me because you pretty much covered it. Todd, you know this industry. I know you give me a lot of credit. You know this industry as good as anyone else. You hit all the main points. I mean, this is an opportunity for additional tax revenue, better, higher employment rates, medical research that's going to be done. 280E tax provision is a complete mess. It would resolve the 280E issue. So, almost every week on our show, we go over this list of benefits that would be derived to the federal government if they were to legalize. But at the end of the day, I still think we're pretty far away from that actually happening. So, theoretically, there's tons of benefits I think the federal government could derive. Realistically, I still think we're ways away from that actually occurring. And I think what's more interesting is I don't think companies are really thinking about what the world looks like if things were federally legal. And I think we are getting to the point where some of these state approved businesses really need to start talking to their lawyers, accountants, and other business advisors about how they should be structuring their business so that they could capitalize when the federal government does legalize. And I don't think that's something that a lot of the cannabis businesses are doing enough of.
A shameless plug here. You said they need to talk to their lawyers, accountants, and business people. Where better to find those than at Cannabis Lab, where the lab stands for law, accounting, and business. Join CLab.com. Folks, not news, but just something that is personal and near and dear to me. This chief strategy officer of Ianthus, Beth Stavola, resigned from the company that she helped build. We don't need to dig into this. We don't need to get into the reasons, but Beth was on our show on Elevate Your Grind, episode 6 or 7, way back when the only people who watched it were my parents and possibly Dustin. She came on the show. She gave us a great interview. She stayed longer than she needed to. She was just an absolutely amazing person and treated us with such respect. So we wish her the best. I know she's got a book coming out on August 11th. Definitely check it out. It's called The New Chardonnay. But Beth Stavola, here at the Lab Report at Elevate Your Grind and at Cannabis Lab, we wish you the best in your journey, and we're excited to see what you do next. Listen, that's all I have going into the weekend. Dustin, anything you want to leave us with before we get out of here?
Nothing at all. Just have a great weekend and stay safe.
All right, everybody. Well, that is all you need to know to help you grow, and we'll see you next week. All right, cool. Done.
Good stuff. So for the Delta 8 stuff, are you able to reach out to those people, or?
I can reach out to Bob and Rachel for sure.
I'll reach out
so,
to.
yeah.
I'll reach out. I could reach out to Rocket. Do we have a date we want to set, or should we just try to reach out and just see if there's interest first?
Do we want to make it a C-Lab event, or do we want to just make it like a special internet thing?
Really up to you. All I care about is being a part of it, and I actually care about the conversation because I think it's something that needs to be done. I'm interested also here. I mean, I think it would be helpful if all of us maybe got on the phone beforehand and had an idea of what
100%.
all our thoughts are. But I'm actually genuinely interested to hear what they have to say, and I have a lot of clients that are investing in this Delta 8 business. Like they're investing, and if the DEA comes out with something in the next couple of weeks that clarifies that, they're taking the position that Delta 8 derived from hemp is illegal, it's going to hurt businesses. I think it's important that we start discussing it and trying to see if we could get, my goal really is for FDACS to put forth some regulations around it. And so I've talked to HIA and Florida Hemp Council, and I'm trying to work through them to kind of put some pressure, and they're all on board too. So we're actually going to be putting some pressure on FDACS to get that done. And I think it'll just bring more